So the previous serial, The Web Planet, was a massive letdown. Following on from the incredibly different Romans, things have hit a low, with a very slow and dull story. But ex-script editor David Whittaker has returned with a new historical, commissioned by producer Verity Lambert herself. From what we've seen so far, Whittaker hasn't been known for his incredible plots. But when it comes to characters and their dialogue, he's second to none. Let's see if he's still on his game with this adventure, with the Crusade. The serial begins in the forest, where King Richard and his associates are discussing sport before being attacked by Saracens, led by the serial's main villain, Elakia. In order to save the king, his friend William de Prey tells the Saracens he is the king and becomes their captive. During this attack, the TARDIS has landed, leading to Barbara's capture, alongside Ian getting into a fight with one of the Saracens. The remainder of the quartet find the injured William deturnable, which allows for the Doctor to realise where and when they have landed, that being 12th century Jaffa. Now there's two things to talk about here, the first being the dialogue by David Whittaker. I will discuss this further later in the serial, but I want to bring it up now to leave an impression. Looking at the opening scene with the king and his men, we instantly get a good idea of their dynamic. There's an air of good humour between them, giving a strong sense of them having a history together, which the episode builds upon further as we see them interact more and learn their dynamics better. But beyond just that, we have the characters speaking with an older dialect, and their usage of terms stands out.
Here's a man devoted to his work.
A beautiful thing, sire, but it has a stubborn streak. The clasp is faulty and needs hot fires to make it pliable.
This dialogue only becomes better as the serial progresses, so I'll discuss it further then. The second thing of note is Douglas Campbell's direction. While his first episode was Planets of Giants 4, which became part of Planets of Giants 3, the serial is the first he directed in its entirety. Now sadly half of it is missing, but what we do have is good. I will discuss shots when they come up as there's a few that come to mind, but for the moment I want to speak about the fight between Ian and one of the Saracens. Now looking at the framing of the scene, it may look familiar, and that's good shot in a very similar way to the fight between Zara and Cal in An Unearthly Child. This is because Douglas Camfield was the production assistant for that serial, and due to Waris Hussein having a limited knowledge of film, Camfield shot these scenes. Back to the plot, the Doctor decides that they need disguises to fit in with the period. So he and Vicky go to a market where they decide to steal some clothes, with the Doctor justifying this decision because they were already stolen. He steals them from a man named Ben DeHere, who there's something about this guy's face which is... Anyway, hopefully the Doctor's decision won't come back to bite any of them in the behind. Let's check on Barbara, who is being held with William de Prey at Saladin's encampment at Ramla. William de Prey is still under the guise of being King Richard, but reveals his true identity to Barbara, who agrees to pretend to be Richard's sister, Joanna. The two are given an audience with Saphadin, the brother of Saladin. Saphadin isn't fooled by the deceit, seeing through it immediately.
Princess Joanna.
No less.
Less than less.
This is where Saladin makes his appearance, and immediately this guy has a presence. Despite the deceit, he is calm, and even has a respect for de Prey's selfless act. He and Barbara get a lot of good moments in this scene. Their back and forth is just incredible to watch.
What do you say to that?
Sounds like the punishment for a fool.
It does. And who here is the most foolish?
And the quality just continues as the two of them talk, so Saladin can decide Barbara's fate.
Are you afraid of me?
No.
I cannot dispense life and death lightly.
I don't believe you're as calculating as that.
Then learn more of me.
Like Scheherazade.
Over whose head hung sentence of death.
Saladin is such an interesting character. He's quite merciful and seems somewhat exhausted by the war between him and Richard. Now I don't know anything about the real life Saladin, so I can't say how accurate of a portrayal this is, but the way he's written and played is so amazing. It just makes me believe that this is the real man standing before Barbara, whether he is accurate or not. Although I am aware that this depiction of him has been praised for being non-stereotypical, notably with his name being pronounced correctly, something which was unusual for depictions of him in the West. I want to know Camfield's direction again here, as I love how he presents Saladin, having him behind a curtain listening to the conversations in his throne room before making his presence known, with the close-up showing him thinking and focusing on his reactions to what is being said. It's such a strong introduction for the character and makes him feel powerful, not using his presence until the moment is right for the greatest effect. There's also something about him in Saphadin. I just can't... Something about him looks... I'm not sure. Saladin looks a lot like Tyler from the Dalek Invasion of Earth. In fact, Bernard Kay, who played Tyler, is credited in this serial, so maybe the two of them will interact and I'll see how similar they are. But anyway, a short while later Barbara is preparing to dine with Saladin. She's kidnapped by a man named Luigi under the orders of Elakia, who was insulted by her before. She manages to escape and ends up fleeing through Lydda, with Elakia's guards close behind. Here she meets Haroun, who helps her to escape and hides her. So Haroun is a victim of Elakia, as Elakia took a liking to Haroun's daughter, but he refused to give them to him. So one day when Haroun was away with his daughter Sophia, Elakia burnt his house down, killing his wife and son before taking Haroun's other daughter, Maimuna. Now Haroun's role in this serial isn't massive or anything. He doesn't appear until halfway through, but his actor plays it incredibly. The scene where he's describing what happened to his family really takes your breath away, as he sells the character's pain in such a subtle but powerful way. And the close-ups really help this too, as you can truly see the pain in his eyes. I'm glad that his performance in this episode survived, because as a reconstruction I doubt it would hold the same impact. We also meet Sophia, who doesn't know the full truth about her family, thinking they've just disappeared, telling Barbara that Harone searches for them constantly. Harone leaves his knife with Barbara, so that if Elakir's men come, she can...
Kill her?
Yes, and afterwards yourself.
No.
You must.
Now this is dark, and Barbara is understandably upset by this, but can't actually argue her way out of it, and so keeps the knife, even though she has no intention of using it. As Harone feared, the house is searched, and Barbara is captured, being taken to Elakir. As we've covered Barbara's plotline for episodes 1 through 3, we'll move back to the rest of the quartet. So having stolen the clothes, the Doctor and company are in the King's throne room, having at some point off screen met with him, and taken the injured William de Tourneborough to safety. Like with Barbara's meeting with Saladin as seen before, the dialogue here absolutely shines. King Richard's speech about the death of his friends and the actions of his brother John at current is just amazing.
My friends cut down about my ears or stolen. And now I learn my brother John thirsts after power. He's planning to usurp my crown and trades with my enemy Philip of France. A tragedy of fortunes, and I am too much beset by them. A curse on this, 1,000 curses!
Now I believe a lot of the dialogue by the English characters is written in iambic pentameter, although I am not an expert on it, so take that with a grain of salt. Either way, Whittaker's dialogue absolutely shines here, and combined with Julian Glover's performance, it just pulls you into this world, and brings the character to life. And his final line of the episode, which leads into the cliffhanger, is just so strong.
Understand this. This woman can rot in one of Saladin's prisons until her hair turns white, before I'll trade with the man that killed my friends.
Since the remainder of the quartet split up, I'll discuss Ian's plotline first. So Ian is able to go to Saladin to trade to the lives of Barbara and William de Prey, due to a change of mind of King Richard. But before Ian leaves, this happens.
I have one duty to perform before you leave. You are without rank or title, and while we do not doubt your courage, our emissary shall speak from a proper position of authority. What is your name?
Ian Chesterton.
Kneel. In the name of God, St. Michael and St. George, we dub you Sir Ian, Knight of Jaffa. Arise, Sir Ian, and be valiant.
So from this point on, Ian is Sir Ian, Knight of Jaffa. I do like this scene. While the gaining of the title has nothing to do with the overall plot, as I don't recall it ever being mentioned again, it's just cool to see Ian given this level of respect by a king he has only just met. By the time Ian arrives at Saladin's encampment at Ramla, Barbara has already been kidnapped and escaped, with the culprit having already been caught. In fact, Ian doesn't depart for Ramla until after this discovery has been made, only learning of it from William de Prey, as seen before the cliffhanger of episode 2. Ian of course goes to find Barbara and heads to Lydda, but while stopped to arrest, he is attacked by 2 bandits, who tie him up, with one of the bandits leaving with all of Ian's belongings. Now this subplot exists as William Russell was on holiday during episode 3 and so needed to be separated from the rest of the main cast, so he only appears in pre-filmed inserts, very similar to the Reign of Terror last season. I will admit that while this subplot does slow the pacing of Ian's story, it is better implemented than with the Reign of Terror, as due to the nature of Ian basically being the lead in season 1, it meant that the plot basically stopped while William Russell was on holiday. But here it's Barbara's story, and so the plot continues to move, with Ian interacting with the core plotline when necessary in episode 4. So to sum this plotline up, Ian tricks his captor Ibram into untying his legs and is able to escape, and is able to get Ibram's assistance in finding Barbara. There's not a lot to say with Ian's plot until he reaches Lydda, but I do want to talk about one thing. Ian is tied up under the sun as a form of torture, but Ibram also uses ants by placing a trail of honey which will lead the ants to Ian, where they'll either irritate him or eat away at him. They don't state it, but I'm always left with the idea that they'll eat away at him when they eat the honey. But the interesting part to me is that William Russell refused to shoot the scene with the ants, and so a hand double was used, this being production assistant Victor Zritellis, whose name will come up again next season. We'll cover the Doctor and Vicky now as they spend the entire serial together, plus I can cover everything they do at once, before wrapping the main plotline up. So there's a few things going on. Firstly, the Doctor has become an advisor to the King, as he sees wisdom in the Doctor's words. I think this is best shown in episode 3, when there's a confrontation between the Doctor, the King and the Earl of Leicester. The Earl of Leicester was against the peace that the King was trying to form, and instead wanted to kill the Saracens. So he revealed Richard's plan to wed off his sister Joanna to Saphadin. The Earl doesn't hide his displeasure of a peaceful solution, and the Doctor doesn't hold back.
Protect, sir! Here's an opportunity to save the lives of many men, and you do not, but turn it down.
And just like the rest of the serial, Whittaker's dialogue shines. We also have the weird plotline which goes basically nowhere, where Vicky is disguised as a boy, because... well, I'm not really too sure. Vicky says...
he was just trying to protect me.
Protect you from my lord the king?
in reference to the Doctor, but there's really no reason why the Doctor would need to do this. While Vicky gives a reason, as the Earl pointed out, there was no real reason, and there's no actual problem caused by this reveal other than just giving the Earl of Leicester more reason to dislike the Doctor and company, which given the Doctor in his confrontation in episode 3 really wasn't needed. It does admittedly give a few humorous lines to some characters, notably the Chamberlain, but that's all. The subplot wasn't too important goes for another subplot in the serial, that being the stealing of the clothes. So the Doctor stole clothes from Ben Dahir, which had previously been stolen. It turns out that these clothes were stolen from the palace. This is noticed by the Chamberlain, who I'll note has a very impressive moustache. The Chamberlain is able to get Ben Dahir to identify the Doctor, but when confronted about it, the Doctor is able to shift the blame by pointing out that as he stole them from Ben Dahir, he couldn't have stolen them from the palace.
Yes, now there really is a point there, isn't there? If I stole from you, my Lord Chamberlain, how could I steal from him?
Then due to a bit of luck, the real thief, Thatcher, enters the room which allows Ben Dahir to identify him, causing him to flee. And before the Chamberlain can give chase, we have this absolutely great moment.
Oh, my dear Chamberlain, so undignified. The merchant bought the clothes in good faith and paid for them in good money. Now, please return his man. But I have to catch the thief. Now, you mustn't let an honest man suffer. Pay him. Oh.
The way the Doctor manages to shift the blame away from him and then actually finds a way to pay Ben Dahir is just glorious. The combination of dialogue along with how it's acted is supremely enjoyable. A shame it's missing and can't be witnessed in its entirety. That's kind of it for the Doctor and Vicky. These subplots do fill the runtime, but outside of the Earl of Leicester stuff, they don't have much impact on the overall plot. Everything wraps up very neatly with no lingering problems. The Earl is only important going forward, as he is the final hurdle between the Quartet and the TARDIS, which Ian is easily able to get around. The thing is, for as purposeless as a lot of these subplots feel, they are beautifully written. I've noted the dialogue between the Doctor and the Earl, but that's only scratching the surface. Almost every English character speaks with such grace, with dialogue that just pulls you in. While I don't think that this serial has the same impact with its character work as Whittaker's previous serials, this is almost certainly his greatest in terms of dialogue alone. Before we leave the palace, I'll discuss Joanna, as I've mentioned her name a few times but not actually talked about her. Now Joanna has a few dynamics, notably with the Doctor and her brother the King. We'll note the Doctor first, as he's the lesser of these dynamics. So other than Joanna learning that Vicky is in fact a girl and insisting in giving her some proper clothing, Joanna takes the Doctor into her confidence and in her own words,
I am my brother's favourite, yet now I find I am excluded from his confidence. I sense he's made a plan of which I am a part.
And when the Doctor asks why she's coming to him, her response is,
There's something new in you, yet something older than the sky itself. I sense that I can trust you.
Like the other dialogue exchanges, this is great. But Joanna's response, for a time in Doctor Who when we didn't know much about the Doctor's origins, with some later serials in this season potentially suggesting different ideas, is such a tease of who he is without being too much. And I think it also shows the Doctor's growth as a character, as at the start he had an aura of villainy, but now he has one which gives the people around him trust in him. This was something Vicky also sensed about him back in the rescue. It really shows how strong of an understanding of the Doctor that Whittaker has. Now we have Joanna's dynamic with the King, which is very interesting to say the least. But to look at this dynamic we need to look at how they were written in the original script, as changes were made during the rehearsal period. So the King and Joanna were written to imply an ancestral relationship between the two, something that actors Julian Glover and Jean Marsh apparently went full in on with their performances. But Hartnell disapproved of this and thought that the subtext was inappropriate for the time slot and intended audience, and so a lot of this dialogue which implied this was removed, and producer Verity Lambert had to step in to warn Glover and Marsh about their performances, saying, "Don't think I don't know what you're doing." Now there are definitely still hints of this in the broadcast version, and it does make you wonder what was cut. Unfortunately a lot of their scenes together are missing, and so we lose the performances of both actors, which may push the dialogue further, although the telesnaps do show a few moments. With the plot mostly covered, we'll get to wrapping things up by heading back to Barbara. So with her a captive of Elakir, she easily escapes and hides within his harem. She escapes by knocking coins from Elakir's hand to the ground, causing all the guards to scurry around them. I do want to note that despite everything she knows of Elakir, Barbara says she's not afraid of him.
I have spent time and trouble on you. Now you cost me gold as well.
I'm not afraid of you.
While hiding, Barbara meets Haroon's daughter, Maimuna, who helps to keep her hidden from the guards, but another member of the harem, Fatima, wants a reward for turning Barbara in, and so reveals the truth to Elakir. This leads to a confrontation where Elakir goes to kill, or at least severely injure Maimuna, but Haroon arrives, killing Elakir before he can. Ian at this point has reached Lydda with Ibram, and is able to reunite with Barbara, allowing them to return to the TARDIS using the horses that Ibram acquired. At the TARDIS, the Earl of Leicester has followed the Doctor to kill him, but due to the arrival of Ian and Barbara, they are able to escape through Ian pretending to have been hunting down the Doctor, and insisting that he shall be the one to kill him. And the Earl allows this, and a final request from the Doctor, which is to look at Jaffa once more, but this gives the quartet the opportunity to escape, reaching the TARDIS which dematerialises, leaving the Earl and his soldiers stunned.
We will not speak of this. Let this story die here in this wood. or we'll be branded idiots or liars.
With the plot wrapped up, the quartet discuss the past events, mostly Ian's knighthood, but something happens, the TARDIS lights dim and they stand motionless. So there's a lot that happens in the Crusade, but very little of it really moves the plot along. With Barbara separated from the rest of the quartet, the Doctor and Vicky just end up having to wait around until Ian returns with her, which leads to the multiple subplots which don't end up affecting the overall plot. Now from Whittaker's previous serials we know that plot isn't his forte, the character is, and this serial is brimming with it, and the dialogue, as I've mentioned many times before, is some of the best in the show. I wouldn't say it's quotable as it's very untraditional, but it's very memorable and brings the characters to life. Beyond the plot issues which just have everyone waiting around until they realise they've got 10 minutes left until the end, there's also one other big problem with this story, and that's that, like with the Reign of Terror, it lacks much information about the setting. Given that this serial is a historical, its purpose is to inform the viewer about the historical setting, but this serial really doesn't. In fact, the best way I can sum it up is that after watching, I didn't know which Crusade the serial was set in. After researching it, it's the Third Crusade. But this lack of historical information does hinder the serial, and perhaps could have filled some of the Doctor and Vicky's time on screen, instead of one of the pointless subplots. So now I've got to talk about the elephant in the room. As I've hinted at earlier, some of the actors don't look right, and that's because the cast members playing the majority of non-white roles are Caucasian actors with their faces blacked up with makeup. Notably Bernard Kay as Saladin and Reg Pritchard as Ben DeHere. Bernard Kay, having previously appeared in the Dalek Invasion of Earth, makes this obvious. I don't think I have to say this, but I think it's best to say it for clarity, and that's that this is of course an act of the past and of its time. The serial can be enjoyed despite of this, but it's important to note that this did happen. One final thing to note about this serial, as it was during the production of this serial that Verity Lambert decided to leave the producer role. So I think I've made all my thoughts on this serial quite clear when discussing the plot. I do love this serial for its dialogue and how well defined its characters are. It has its shortcomings from both a plot and production side, but there is plenty of enjoyment that can be gained from being drawn into this world through the dialogue. It does lack the historical information, even the basic which crusade this is, but it's somewhat hard to notice as it doesn't feel odd that nobody outright states it. A must-watch historical? I'd say so. But with our quartet frozen and the TARDIS lights down, what could have happened, and what could be awaiting them? Will this cliffhanger lead into an incredible resolution, a story with very little to enjoy, or somehow both? Next time, the Space Museum.